Playground Stalker, posted in the Let's Not Meet subreddit by Ziggy Bar. This happened about 9 years ago when I was in middle school. I had totally forgotten about it till my friend brought it up yesterday. In 7th grade, my best friend and I would walk down to her family's restaurant after school. It was about 4 blocks from the school, not a long walk at all. Between the school and the restaurant there was a public park with a playground. Only kids from the school would hang out there. Sometimes when the weather was nice, we would hang out at the park. If we were there for more than an hour, usually her uncle would come check on us. We did this for most of the school year. Around March, a strange man started showing up around the park, trying to talk to the girls, asking them about school or things they like to do. He did this for a couple weeks, then disappeared. We never really thought much of it. Then one day it was my best friend and I at the park, and he shows up. He starts talking to my friend, trying to get him to go out with her. She keeps saying no. He grabs her arm and tries to pull her along. We both scream for him to let her go. Her uncle was on the way to check on us and he heard us scream. We can see him running towards us. He tackles the guy and tells us to run into the restaurant. We go and tell her mom what happened. Her mom calls the cops, but the guy hit her uncle and got away. The cops never found him and told us if anything else seemed suspicious to call them. So, guy at the playground, let's not meet. Home Alone, posted in the Let's Not Meet subreddit by Drainers. Bear in mind, this was late 2009 and I was only 10 at the time. Me, my mother, and stepdad lived in a small town in Sweden in a big house. If you were upstairs, you could hear talking down at the kitchen, so it wasn't that isolated. One evening I was home alone because my mom and stepdad were going to my grandma's house, and I asked them if I could stay home alone because, as a typical 10-year-old, I thought I was too grown for a babysitter. After about an hour of nagging, she gave up and told me I could stay home alone only if I kept her door locked and never opened it to anyone. It was really exciting for me and I stayed up really late watching cartoons. If I remember correctly, I was watching SpongeBob in our living room and eating ice cream. After about 5 minutes eating the delicious ice cream, I was sure I heard a silent knock on the door. I didn't think much of it and continued watching the show. After 5 minutes passed, I heard the knocking again, but this time it was much louder. I was frozen in fear and waited for the knocking to stop. After about 30 seconds, the knocking stopped, and the only sound was the TV. I called my mom, and she said that she'll be home in 20 minutes, and she told me to go into my room and lock the door. I went into my room without turning the TV sound off, so it was pretty loud. I sat in my room, and after 2 minutes, I heard somebody not knocking, but banging really loud at the door. I was frozen in fear once again. After about 3 minutes, I could hear the door lock turn and somebody walking in. The person was inside my house while I was home alone. I sat there in my room quiet, and then the TV turned off. The footsteps were louder and I felt like it was coming towards my room. After a couple of seconds, the steps stopped, and I could hear knocking on my bedroom door. And an old man said, "Let me in. I have something for you." I started screaming and crying for my mother, and the man started shaking the door handle. After 2 minutes, I heard a car outside, so I looked out the window. It was my mom. I opened the window and screamed for help and that there's a man in the home. My stepdad quickly ran into the shed to get his axe and ran up the stairs. The man quickly ran out the back door and my stepdad ran after him into the streets. My mom called the police and my stepdad calmed me down when he got in. This is an experience I will never forget. Thank you for reading this. The Guy in the Stairway, posted in the Let's Not Meet subreddit by Lutu. It was the summer between my sophomore and junior year of college. and I stayed in my college town to work rather than return to my hometown. I lived in an apartment near campus with a roommate. I didn't start work until 3 or 4 in the afternoon, so I spent my mornings lounging, snoozing on a blanket in the back courtyard of my multi-building apartment complex, filled with mostly college students. I would be outside for about an hour, go back inside to cool off in the AC for a few minutes, and come back out. I did this just about every day, but rarely saw anyone else, despite all the buildings surrounding the courtyard. One day I heard my apartment building door open and close as I was snoozing in the sun. It just so happened to be time for me to cool off then, so I got up and went into my building. When I opened the door, there was a guy wearing only shorts standing in the stairway leading down to the basement staring at me. I didn't recognize him, and he creeped me out. So I ran up to my second floor, unlocked apartment. I locked and chained the door and stood there for about 10 minutes, hoping he would be gone when I went back outside. When I got to the first floor landing where the door to the backyard was, I turned toward the basement to see if he was still there. He was, pleasuring himself, staring, smirking at me. I froze for what seems like 20 minutes, but it's probably less than 2 seconds, then ran outside, laid on my blanket, put a towel over my face to stifle my laugh-infused cries, and wondered what the heck just happened. When I heard the door open and close again, I assumed he left, so I gathered up my things and ran back into my apartment. A few minutes later, my roommate and her boyfriend came home. When I told them what happened, they convinced me to call the police. When I was asked to describe the guy, I could say, "Well, officer, I actually didn't get a good look at his face." I could only provide a general description: white male, early 20s, maybe 6 feet, curly brown hair, wearing only shorts. While we waited for the police to arrive, we remembered a friend was on his way over, and he fit the vague description I gave about that guy in the stairway. Of course, the police and he arrived at the same time, and we quickly assured the police he was not the man they were looking for. 2 weeks later, there was a knock at my door, and since we lived in a secured building, I assumed it was a neighbor. When I opened the door, all I saw was an arm holding out a police badge. He introduced himself, scolded me for opening the door without checking who it was, especially considering the reason he was there, to ask me more questions about the guy on the stairs. That was the last time I heard from anyone about it, but the rest of my college life I wondered if every curly brown hair guy I passed on campus was that guy. I realize now that the guy was probably watching me from one of the apartments facing the courtyard, taking note of my morning habits. The Dog Lady. Posted in the Let's Not Meet subreddit by Dylan's Fear Files. I've been a fan of this subreddit for a long time, so I thought I would share a creepy encounter of my own. This is the only one that comes to mind at the exact moment. While it isn't extremely scary, and the woman was justified in her response, this is still a very scary experience for a 13-year-old kid who had lived a sheltered life. In early 2009, when I was 13, I was playing hide-and-seek with some friends that lived on the same street. We always played at night, since it was simply the best time to be stealthy. There was a house across the street from mine, which was burrowed by bushes. These became my default hiding place, and I was almost never caught using them. There was a woman living there who would let me and my friends and I pet her beautiful Great Danes. If you've seen this particular dog breed, then you know how massive they are. She was always very friendly, so this event came as quite a shock. I was hiding in these bushes, which happened to be underneath her window, when I heard someone running by and decided to abandon my hiding spot and move somewhere else. When I got out of the bushes, I was met by this woman and her Great Danes. They surprised me since I didn't even know she lived there anymore. Though the lights I saw should have tipped me off to that fact, but I was a stupid teenager. She asked me angrily what I was doing peeking through her window. I explained that my friends and I were playing hide-and-seek and that I wasn't peeking through her window, but she didn't believe me. She responded by dragging me by the ear in her house with her Danes. She forced me to sit in an armchair in her dimly lit living room, facing her and her large dogs. She began to interrogate me and even threaten me. I tried to explain that I was playing hide and seek with friends, not being a peeping Tom, but she didn't believe me, thinking that kids wouldn't play hide and seek during the night. When I tried to get her to remember me, she said she didn't know me and proceeded to make threats. She said she would feed me to her dogs and bury me in the backyard if she caught me there again. Needless to say, I was terrified and I got out of there, rendezvousing with my friends who were equally shocked at this turn of events. Soon we saw the police had pulled up by her house, and she identified me as the person peeking through her window. My parents and the father of some of my friends came over when they saw the police officer. I explained myself, telling them that we were playing hide and seek, and she threatened, and he believed me, much to the rage of this woman. He left. No one was in trouble, thankfully. My parents reached the conclusion that she was crazy. When my friend's father asked the cop if he thought she was drunk because she's a known alcoholic. I honestly can't remember the response, and I don't smell alcohol in her breath, but what I can remember is relief that the situation was over. Needless to say, I didn't hide in her bushes again. I also never even saw her again to my recollection. At some point she lost the house, moved out, and several other owners moved in and out, including my sister, her boyfriend, and my nephews. Just to make myself clear, I understand my part in the situation and should not have been playing hide and seek in her yard. She was scared and acted out of fear. The whole thing was a big misunderstanding and could have been easily avoided. That being said, it was still a very scary situation for both of us, I'm sure. I'm not a victim because I was trespassing on her property, albeit unknowingly. Angry Guy followed me home from work. Posted in the Let's Not Meet subreddit by Poltergeist. This happened a couple days ago. For reference, I'm a 17-year-old female in Australia and I live a half an hour drive out of town. It was about 10:30 p.m. and I just had finished work. I was on the close shift and it was a Tuesday night, so naturally it was dead and nobody was around. I was driving home alone and I was stuck behind this four-wheel drive utility thing, not good with cars, sorry, and need to get in the next lane. He was indicating but wasn't actually going anywhere, so I indicated and overtook him in the next lane over. As I was level with him, he began veering towards me, and all I could think about was how much it was going to cost to fix that. So I slammed my hand on the horn and made the "what are you doing" gesture as I passed him. In awkward coincidence, the lights turned red and we stopped side by side. He mentioned for me to wind down the window and I obliged. I was about to apologize, but I didn't even get a word out before he started screaming at me. He called me the worst names possible, and then threatened to ram me into the motorway. I was tired, it was late, and I couldn't be bothered with him, so I just rolled my eyes at him and wound the window back up while he was talking. That royally pissed him off. He turned bright red and I saw him reach down, and the ute door opened. I panicked and floored it through the red light onto the motorway. I thought I was alright for a second, but I saw him in my mirror speeding up behind me. He was clearly speeding up to catch me, since I was going like 10 kilometers over the speed limit. He had his high beams on and kept flashing them. He was right up behind me and I could only think about what he'd said about crashing into me, so I tried to go a little faster. I was looking for his number plates in the mirror so I could report him, but either the lights were too bright for me to see or there was nothing there at all. And there was no way in heck I was going to stop after a performance like that before. I finally got off the motorway. He was still behind me, and I was a little paranoid that he was following me. Even through the motorway only really led to one area. It could have still been a coincidence, so I pulled into the nearest street, and he was still behind me, so I promptly did a U-turn, and the guy did as well. I realized he was absolutely following me. I was about 20 minutes away from home at this point, and I didn't want to lead him anywhere near my house, so I decided on a split-second decision to go to the nearest police station and hopefully get him off of me. Unfortunately, the police station closed at 9:30, and I only ended up pulling into a dark, empty car park. I pulled over facing the entrance so I could see if he had followed me. I didn't see him coming in, thankfully, and I figured he'd chickened out since he saw the police station. I debated calling the cops since I didn't think I was in any danger anymore. That was until I noticed out of the corner of my eye a certain white ute slowly creeping up on my left with its lights off. Once again, I panicked and floored it out of the car park and back towards the main road. I had no idea where I was going, no intention to pull over, and no clue who to call. I was going in the complete opposite direction of my house. I eventually spotted a nice brightly lit petrol station and pulled into there, parking as close to the doors as I possibly could. I jumped out, frantically waved my arms at the doors. They lock them at night and have to be manually opened. When I was let in, I started screaming at the poor lady at the register to lock the doors and that someone was following me. I was absolutely terrified, but thankfully she was quick on the uptake and locked the doors. I realized I'd left my phone in the car, but she offered to call the police. I was keeping an eye on the road while the clerk called the cops. I absolutely saw that car drive past, but he didn't come in. The clerk waited for me with the cops to show up, and eventually they did. It was almost 11 by the time they got there. I had literally never been happier to see a cop car in my life. They asked me to describe the guy and the ute and asked for the registration. I gave them what I could, and one of them drove with me home. I haven't heard any follow-ups from anyone, but it was absolutely terrifying, and enough so that I asked to be taken off night shifts for a little while. I've only been driving for a little under a year, but honestly, I don't think anything is going to top that experience. If people are interested, I'll definitely update if I hear anything about the guy. Working in a cemetery. Posted in the Let's Not Meet subreddit by Gillyflowerface. My high school runs a program where we research people that have died in a local cemetery, then dress up as them and perform a skit in the middle of the night. It's part of a bigger program celebrating the town's history and is very popular, so the line for parking is insane and people often wait in line for an hour or more. The program has been running for 25 years now and is very well known in the community, so there is almost no one in the town that doesn't know what's happening. This is my second and final year working in the program, and I was in charge of parking this year, along with my girlfriend and a few other seniors. So this was the first week of the program on Friday night, our most popular night. The area of the cemetery that we park cars in was filling up pretty quick, and we were all really busy. About 8:30 or 9, a blue minivan drove towards me at the spot that I was directing, and stopped in front of me, which is unusual since my job is to just direct them around the corner towards someone who helps them into their parking spot. They rolled down the window and called me over. The second their window rolled down, a wave of smoke, not entirely cigarettes, hit me. There was a very thin woman inside coughing at me, and next to her was another woman about in her 30s that stayed staring straight ahead the whole time. Once the driver was done coughing, we had this conversation. "I'm here to visit a grave." "All right, where's the grave? I can move some barriers for you." Her obviously not knowing what direction she was going. "The grave is that way." She pointed right behind me in an area of the graveyard almost entirely full of really old graves, so I knew if she was looking for a grave, it wasn't that way. "All right, I can move this for you, and once you need to leave, let the director know and we can help you out the back gate." "Okay, who died?" "Huh?" She said, "Who died? I've never seen this many people for a funeral before." I didn't know how to respond, so I just directed her towards the direction she pointed. Keep in mind, this was at 9 p.m. and there were about 500 people here for this event. The woman went about 2 roads back and sat with her friend in the front of a very old grave for about 30 minutes, and then got in her car and left without getting anyone else's help. Every day past that, she came back into the cemetery at the same time and asked the exact same questions, still wondering who had died.